Welcome to the What's Your Deal podcast, where we discuss business acquisitions, investments, management, and exit strategies. I'm your host, Matt Euler. Let's dive in. Welcome back to another episode of What's Your Deal. Today I am joined with Matt Middendorp, and I'm excited to have him because he is the director of ESOP Consulting at VisionPoint Capital. So he helps business owners explore employee ownership as a powerful exit strategy. And his perspective comes from actually firsthand experience working inside an ESOP-owned company early in his career. So since then, he's become an award-winning banker, entrepreneur, and trusted advisor helping founders navigate succession, legacy, and wealth creation. Matt, welcome to What's Your Deal?
No, thank you, Matt, for having me on. I guess we got two Matts. It's a party, right?
We do. Yeah, we're ready to go, and it'll be easy for me to remember your name and vice versa, I'm sure.
Well, if one of us forgets, then that makes it all the better. So let's just go.
Right. So part of why I'm so excited that you joined us today is this whole world of ESOP can be so mystifying, and I've been involved with a couple, and they're still mystifying to me in so many ways. So let's just start with what is an ESOP and what are some of the misconceptions people have about ESOPs and how they might help them?
Yeah. So let's just make a very long story short. An ESOP, ESOP, stands for Employee Stock Ownership Plan.
Okay.
An employee stock ownership plan is a business transition tool. So what happens in an ESOP transaction? An ESOP trust is formed, and that trust buys the company from the shareholders, all or part of it. Or let's put this another way, the shareholders sell the company to an ESOP trust.
Okay.
Right? Now, there are a lot of really great things about ESOP that we're going to get into today. But it sounds like you kind of want to start with some of the misconceptions. Is that where
that would be great? Yeah. And a lot of our audience is either business owners or aspiring business owners, and people contemplating exiting. I get the question quite frequently, is an ESOP an appropriate option? And so, if you can just break it down for us a little bit further, that would be great.
No, that's fantastic. So in ESOP, some misconceptions about ESOP. Let's start with this. One of those things is from a price standpoint, right? I always look at every business transition that I work with under four lenses. Price, right? How much you're going to make. Control, who's going to run the company after. Mm-hmm. Identity, if you're a business owner, your whole life is your business. For most of us, it consumes us, right? Mm-hmm. And then the last part is legacy. Do you want to look your employees in the eye when you leave or not? Right? So if we talk about the misconceptions of ESOP, let's start with price.
Okay.
Because in my experience, there's two different ways to look at price. There's the top line number, and there's your after-tax return. And one of the big misconceptions about ESOP is that, hey, you got to sell the PE, you've got to do a strategic transaction because it's the only way to get the number, right? You're never going to make as much money otherwise. But the truth of it is we go head to head with PE all the time and we win.
Really?
Sometimes on top line number, but most of the time on after-tax return, because ESOP has some special tax treatments that you don't get the other way. And by the way, you don't get stuck with the earnouts and the clawbacks and the reinvestments and all the things that come with selling to a third party or private equity, right? So It's a much cleaner transaction that way. So one of the misconceptions is you won't make as much. Absolutely not true. You don't have to be Mother Teresa to sell to your employees.
Very good.
The second thing is control, right? Who's going to be in control of your company the day after you sell? And everybody thinks, there's this trust that has a trustee and the trustee runs the company. The truth of it is the trustee doesn't want to run your company. The people that run your company the day before the transaction are the same people that run it the day after. So that's a big thing.
Yeah, let me ask you real quick on that, including the seller?
Yeah.
Or the previous owner, I should say?
Yep.
Okay.
I like to call ESOP a business transition tool, and sometimes they're transitioning out. Very rarely is it the day after the transaction. It can be, but a lot of times it's 3 to 5 years later. I have people that have sold their business to an ESOP trust that are in their early 40s, and they're not going anywhere for 10 to 15 years. They're part of it, right? So because they know they're going to be running their company, they're in control.
Okay.
Versus the alternative is you sell it, you have earnouts, but you're not in control of what's happening and whether or not you're going to earn those earnouts, right?
Yep.
So yeah, absolutely. But there's exit, and there's also selling forward too, right? Transitioning forward. So yeah, the trustee doesn't want to run your company. You get to run the company. The same people that run it the day before, the same people that run it the day after.
Okay, that's excellent.
Yep. So another misconception about ESOP is that uh, because you're selling to the trust, it's not your company anymore, which is true, right? You don't technically own it, but if your name's on the door and your identity is wrapped up as a business owner, you are still in charge, right? It's still, while it's not owned by you, it's still very closely tied to you, and you're able to be out in your community. And the profits that, if you sold to private equity, be leaving town, stay right where they are. Right. So my favorite clients are the ones that have their name on the local high school football scoreboard or in the gym, or they sponsor everything in town. And that's important to their identity as a business owner, to stay and keep those profits in their communities.
Yeah, great points. Yep.
Right. And then the last one is legacy. Again, I've already told you you're going to make just as much money selling to an ESOP. Well, from a legacy standpoint, there's a continuum, right? There's people that just want to wash their hands and walk out the door, and they don't care what happens to their company after they sell it. And they don't mind driving off in their third Corvette and just leaving behind whatever happens, right? But there are a lot of people that want to high five their employees on the way out, right? They want to celebrate this transition that just happened in the lives that they're changing. And that legacy is important. I talked to a business earlier today. It's a small manufacturing firm, actually right here in Wisconsin, where I'm at, not far from where I grew up. And they have offers from third-party buyers all over the place, but in the end, they're coming to ESOP because they know that if this manufacturer leaves this small Wisconsin town, those jobs are never coming back.
Wow.
And they want that to be their legacy, that they built something that stayed.
Yeah, it's I'm jotting down some points I want to cover while we're talking. Yeah. But before I dive into those, maybe a good next step would just be to kind of walk us through what does this look like, and what is a small company for this kind of a program, or too small for it to work. So maybe you can walk us through some of the logistics, and then I'll dive into some of my questions.
Okay, so let's start with the program that I'm talking about is a U.S.-based program. So you have to be a U.S.-based company.
Okay.
I get calls from companies that are incorporated in Mexico or overseas, and no, you got to be U.S.-based. Other countries have other versions of this, but I do this in the old USA, right? So number one, US-based. Number two, typically minimum of 15 to 20 employees.
Okay.
Right? Obviously, more is better. If you have less, it doesn't have to be off the table. But the truth of it is I'm going to ask different questions if you have fewer than 20 employees.
Okay.
Right? I'm going to need to make sure of some things. You have to be profitable. It sounds crazy, but your company has to be one that somebody wants to buy, right? And I get calls from people every week where they've tried to sell their company and nobody wants to buy it. So they call me and say, I'm just going to sell it to my employees. And
it doesn't work. Yeah.
It doesn't work that way. It's got to be something that the trustee will want to buy for the trust, right?
Okay.
So that's a very important thing. And then the other thing I think that is really important if you're thinking about an ESOP for your company is, does it align with your management and your culture? Meaning, you can be a successful ESOP company where you come into work, you don't talk to anybody, you ride the elevator up to your ivory tower, and you don't really interact. You don't really have a culture of collaboration. Your team doesn't know what's going on with the company's success, with the books, with the numbers, right? But man, it is so much easier if you're somebody who doesn't mind going on the shop floor, right? If you're somebody who doesn't mind helping your employees not just know what's going on with the company, but how they help make it successful, how they make a difference to the bottom line. Because in an ESOP company, you're lining up their financial goals with your financial goals for the first time. And man, they need to know how to help the company make money, whether it's shrink, waste, loss, sale, right? All those things. How do they help? How do they make a difference to their own share price? So yeah, those four things.
Oh, that's great. And so let's talk about their own share price. So these are employees of the company. There's got to be some criteria of who's qualified to participate and who is not. And what does that look like for an employee of a company that participates in an ESOP transaction?
So we've all heard stories, right, about there's a number of ESOP companies around the country that are very well known. Bob's Red Mill. We've got a successful grocery store chain in the Southeast that is an ESOP company. So just to give you an example, I have another manufacturer that I'm working with right now. And by the way, not every ESOP company is a manufacturer. This one just happens to be closely aligned with construction. And we did something called a feasibility study for them. So the cool part about ESOP is you don't have to buy an ESOP. You just have to learn enough to decide that you want to study it and see if it works, right? And part of this study, which I'm sure we'll talk about more, is the impact on your employees.
Okay.
What does their return look like over time? Because the shares don't all go out at once. They go out over the course of many years to the team. And in this case, in 10 years, the average employee would have almost $900,000 in their retirement account.
Wow.
In their ESOP account, right? Uh-huh. So think about that for a second. $900,000. We have an absolute retirement crisis in this country where people just don't have enough saved to retire comfortably. And man, those people who do have enough are probably ESOP employees.
Interesting.
It's a big difference maker.
Well, and it's the thing I love about it, and I've participated in some transactions that were similar structure without the ESOP piece, but sure. The vested interest and the pride of ownership and all of those things that make phenomenal team are built into the ESOP structure. And so it really could be a game changer.
Well, and what's amazing about that, right? You're hiring and retaining better talent. The average employee stays in an ESOP company 4 times longer than a non-ESOP company.
Wow.
Because of that, ESOP companies tend to grow 2.4 to 2.6% faster than non-ESOP companies. In the first year after becoming an ESOP, you talk about some of the employees having a vested interest, productivity tends to increase 4 to 6%.
I'm not surprised. Yeah, it's amazing. Right? And I'm not surprised. Yep.
Again, you align the financial incentives of your people with the financial goals of the company, and things change. It's amazing. It really is.
Well, and the whole idea, I hear it all the time with a lot of Main Street business employees where they're making somebody else money, right? And at some point, they either got to go out on their own or they just resent that fact. This changes that whole piece, doesn't it?
Yep, absolutely. They're, they're not having to contribute directly financially, but they're contributing their time, talent, and expertise in a way that has never rewarded them the same.
And so from a standpoint of qualifying as an employee, I mean, if a company's involved in an ESOP transaction and somebody starts working for them 2 weeks before closing, they're not qualified, right? There's a 10-year time frame structure.
Well, okay, so this is actually something that's part of the process, right? Just like when you put a 401k in place, ESOP is actually established under the same ERISA law that was passed in 1974. So there are certain guardrails, right? So a lot of companies, you have to be 18 years old to work there. You have to work 1,000 hours in a year, right? So you're weeding out the part-time people so they aren't pulling assets out of the plan. A lot of cases, you have to be there a year before you're eligible.
Okay.
And even then, you don't get an allocation of shares for a year after that.
Okay.
So that first year you work 1,000 hours makes you eligible for an allocation of shares the next year.
Okay.
And like I said, a lot of times when we create an ESOP, we'll create 1 million shares that go out over 30 years. So 1/30 of the shares available go out every year.
Okay.
And so there's always an allocation. You don't just dump all the shares on the employees at once. They go out over time in small increments. So people really do get a chance to build up value.
Okay. And so in a team of 15 to 20 people, which sounds like could be the smaller end, but still very viable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could be 10 people out of the 15 or so might be able to participate in this as a shareholder?
Well, and again, if we've got 15 people, I'm going to ask some questions. But yes, that is entirely possible.
Okay, all right, sounds great. And then
I don't want people to suddenly go, man, I got 15 people and 10 of them are full time. Let's go.
Right.
And then find out that 5 of them are related to the shareholders or shareholders themselves, and
that doesn't work.
So,
So, and we'll try to dive through as many of the details to help people make some of these initial decisions and then figure out how to reach out to you. But So let's talk about if management needs to terminate somebody. There's an ESOP employee and they're not performing. They didn't grab a hold of the whole I'm working for myself these days thing, and they need to go. How is that handled through an ESOP?
Well, the beautiful part about ESOP, again, like your 401k, is there is vesting. right? So, and there's different vesting options, and we don't necessarily need to get into the details, but just
Yep.
know that if they've been there for 2 years, you may not owe them any,
Okay.
right? Or the amount you're going to owe them is very minimal. If they've been there for 30 years and they're retiring, you have options on how you pay them back. You don't just have to write a check on the day they leave.
Okay. So from a management control standpoint, the benefits of having employee ownership doesn't need to come with the disadvantage if you can't make the decisions you need to that are appropriate.
Oh, no. And like I already said, ESOP companies grow faster. They're more profitable than non-ESOP companies. Um, ESOP companies retain and hire better people. But the cool part about that is ESOP companies acquire other companies all the time. One of the
Mm-hmm.
neat things about being an ESOP with this trust, it's a qualified retirement plan. And it's the only qualified retirement plan that's allowed to borrow money. So you're not limited in what your company can do because you're an ESOP. ESOP holding companies are a very real thing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that. One of the gentlemen that I worked with on 3 or 4 transactions, his family was the previous owner of a business. They went through
Sure.
the ESOP process and they were acquiring because they had really kind of maximized their market potential within their market. So
Mhm.
they decided instead of trying to spend money and eke out a little bit more, they went in acquisition mode and were
Yep.
acquiring lots of other businesses as an ESOP company.
Well, and some of the tax benefits that go to ESOP companies for being an ESOP make it much easier to fund those acquisitions as well. And I don't know if we want to dive into that, if we want to do the mic drop at at the beginning of this, or if we want to wait a little bit. But that's up to you.
Okay, let's save that one
Okay.
because I like the intrigue of it.
Well,
But let's focus for a minute on seller. Okay, so if a current owner is going to sell through an ESOP, but yet remain in control for 5, 6, 10 years, whatever the number might be,
yep.
why would they do that? Is it just because they've reached their capacity or they want to pull some cash out and diversify? Like, what's the motivation for that person?
The answer is yes to all of that.
Okay.
So I work with clients all the time where they're looking out on a 3 to 5 year horizon and they want to exit in that 3 to 5 year horizon. So they're selling the business and they're transitioning out.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of those people, they transition out of the day to day and into more of a governance role, right? They're on the board instead. Makes
Mm-hmm.
sense. I have a client. In this case, it is a pool construction company with a retail element to it, 4 owners. And those 4 owners are in their early 40s. I mentioned them earlier. They're not going anywhere,
Uh-huh.
but they were pulling liquidity out of their company, right? They were pulling cash out of it so they could go do other things.
Mm-hmm.
And that's awesome, right? They're 10 to 15 years, they're going to stay with this business. But in the meantime, they're going to set up other businesses that are going to grow and be successful as well. I get people that recognize, man, I've got too much money tied up in my business. It's my biggest asset. I need to diversify.
Mm-hmm.
So they pull cash out to go diversify, right? So there's a lot of different reasons that people do this. Like I said, you can transition forward or you can transition out. Either one, for the right company, can have a massive impact.
Well, and it's such an important point. So many of the business owners that I talk to who are approaching me because it's time to exit, they just can't,
Mm-hmm.
they don't see any other option. And I've also in the situations where I've been involved where I refer to it as a cash out refinance sort of thing. They still keep some ownership in. The reality is they're investing or they're placing some of their proceeds into a stock, the company that they know better than any other company they might invest in. And so it becomes such a great investment under the right management structure. Where else would they put their money? And so it really provides an option as opposed to just, okay, I'm done, wash my hands, pay the tax, live on whatever's left over for as long as possible. Just a whole different conversation.
Well, and you touched on something just a second ago that I think is under discussed in the M&A world, right? And I'm not an M&A guy, I'm an ESOP guy, but I talk to people all the time who are doing these exits and these transitions. And that is that most of the time, you just hinted at it, these happen by accident,
Mm.
right? People get to a point in their business where they got to sell and they contact their M&A broker or they get a call from PE and there's one path in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they get a call from a competitor, right? There's one path in front of them that they're not evaluating against other paths.
Uh-huh.
And let's be honest, None of those people on those paths have a financial incentive to talk about any other path. Right. So you're going to talk to an M&A guy who's not going to talk about ESOP because they don't make any money doing it. Right. You're not going to get a competitor trying to buy you and saying, well, you sure this is what you want to do?
Right.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So one of the things that I really like to do is when I'm having these conversations is, again, ESOP is powerful for the right company. It's fantastic, but for the wrong company, for the wrong seller, it's a mistake.
Okay.
Just like any other exit path. So it's one of those things where I want to make sure when we're talking and we're ranking price and control and identity and legacy, that we're meeting the needs of what they're trying to do. And it happens all the time where I talk to people and I'm like, you know what, based on what you're trying to tell me, you want to sell your business, you want to wash your hands and walk away and get paid. That's not ESOP.
Okay. Right. And so is that the seller who it's simply, this is not for, is it one who's literally done and just, they were done a year before?
Yeah.
Okay.
A lot of times, or they're honestly 85 years old.
Okay.
And they held on too long and they don't have time. Right.
Okay.
And so it's one of those things where, again, these decisions shouldn't just happen to you as a business owner. You put so much energy into this and blood and sweat and tears. I've been there. I've sold a business. I know that it was the single hardest decision I ever made. Mm-hmm. Right. I should probably say professional decision. I'd like to think I put a little more thought into getting married, having kids and all that stuff. But right. The truth of it is I didn't lose nearly as much sleep over those decisions as I did about selling my business. Uh-huh. And you should talk to somebody who's going to help you work through a process and make the right decision based on your goals, not just somebody who's going to put their path in front of you because it makes them the most money.
Well, it really is an exit strategy, right? As opposed to just exit. Okay, I'm out, I'm done. Now what? And for a lot of people, I was just talking with a client the other day who he and his wife are trying to evaluate, is it time to exit or not? They don't like it anymore. They're over it. The money is not a factor anymore because they're living the life they want anyway. And so it becomes really an emotional and quality of life decision. And he's worried about, if I exit, will I be miserable? And so this provides a strategy. It's over time and, again, a little more gradual.
And what's amazing about that is I get calls every week from people, and I don't want to vilify PE because PE does some really good things and there is a spot for it for the right decision, right? Uh-huh. But I get calls from people all the time that say, hey, they bought my company 3 years ago. Actually, do you mind if I tell a story?
No, please do.
Saying, I get these calls.
That'd be great.
I get calls where people say, hey, I sold it and I'm going to just restart the same business because I don't like what they did to mine. Uh-huh. But let me tell you a very specific example. I have a client, their transaction is closing at the end of this month. So in just a couple of weeks, 2017, they sold their company to PE. And PE killed it. Mm-hmm. The company was dead. The best employees had left. They had lost their best customers. The company was in the ocean without a rudder, right? He bought the company back for pennies on the dollar, basically AR. So any business owners who are listening going, wait a minute, he bought the company back for just AR? Are you kidding me? Bought it back for AR, built it back up, and he is now selling it for almost 4 times more than he sold it to PE.
Wow.
In 2017. Mm-hmm. It's a fantastic story. And the tax benefits that are going to him, the tax benefits that are going to the company, he's making even more money than he would have in the first place without earnouts, without any ties to the company beyond he's going to stick with it. And he's going to transition into the board and a governance role, which means he has 4 meetings a year. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty powerful tool.
Well, and one of the things that a lot of people I don't realize about PE, but has actually been part of every transaction I've had with a PE firm is the seller's got to stay for some period of time, usually more than they want. No different than an ESOP, although with an ESOP, it's a whole different dynamic. Most of the private equity deals I've been party to, the clawbacks and the earnouts and the carrybacks and all of and the stock ownership, all of that stuff, it becomes so arduous. It's almost like, is it worth doing? Because if I don't get it, I wished I would have kept it.
And the truth of it is I can't imagine going to work at a company that I used to run and not making the decisions anymore.
It's a tough place to be.
Mm-hmm. You're just an employee and your name's on the door.
So with an ESOP, who pays the seller?
In this case, the company does.
Okay, and the company obtains the debt without a guarantor?
So there's a couple of ways that happens. And, so the way this works is this is one of the potential challenges of ESOP for people. And I just want to be really clear about that, right? Because in every ESOP transaction, there is an element of getting paid out over time.
Okay.
I should say almost every ESOP transaction. Now, so let's take, for example, the client I just talked about, they're closing at the end of this month. They're getting roughly 30% of the transaction upfront in bank financing that the company pays back.
Okay.
But the remainder of that transaction is going to be happening through seller financing, meaning the company's got an IOU to the sellers, right? Now, the seller's earning interest. The seller is making a percent and a half more than what the bank's charging them on for the loan. So the seller's making money on that. But again, if you don't want to be involved in a governance role until you get paid back 5-7 years later, then man, that's probably not a strategy you're looking at, right? It just isn't. So if you don't want that risk upon yourself, the potential risk, and it's more important to you just to have a clean break, then again, there's a place for different transitions for different people with different goals. But here's what usually happens is we do a feasibility study, which is a decision-making tool. That's the whole purpose of it, right? And one of those things is what's the impact on the seller? And when you show them that, hey, you're going to get 15 million upfront on a 60 million transaction, and the rest of it's going to pay you 7.5%, 8% interest for the next, let's say 10 years until it's paid off. They look at that final number. And then when you log the tax benefits in on top of it, go, okay, yeah, I can see where this would be attractive. I think this is maybe a path that's viable. Where before that, they were like, oh, wait, no, I just want this top line number. But when you look at the total return, it usually works out pretty well.
Yeah, and there's a lot of wisdom in that too. It's so easy for a lot of folks to get attached. Maybe it's ego, maybe it's something to a number, but the reality is what's left over is what matters the most, and there's so much that can go into that. And so, at the risk of going into the weeds a little bit, so the company obtains the debt without a guarantor because none of the employees, I'm assuming, are guarantors. So it's the company has to qualify.
And that's part of my job, right? That's so for a former banker, former bank executive, my secret sauce is having those conversations with people. And I always tell everybody that 75% of my job is education and the last 25% is managing expectations. So I have to make sure that what they're trying to accomplish is something I can promise them I can do. Right?
Yeah.
That's my job. That's my job in a nutshell, is to educate and to manage expectations. So when you go to the bank, there are not personal guarantees typically in an ESOP loan.
Okay.
There are not personal guarantees from bonding and a surety. So something for people to know about, that those personal guarantees do go away. It's a different world. It really is. But it's one where, because of the success of most ESOP companies, during economic downturns, ESOP companies are 25 times less likely to lay people off.
Wow. Well, that makes sense too. It's something I wouldn't have thought about, but it certainly makes sense.
Yeah, it's crazy. So banks like ESOP companies.
Okay.
They really do.
And then from a cost perspective, I know there's probably no simple answer, but what's there's a cost with any exit for a seller. Where does this fit in?
So here's what I'll tell you is, if you don't mind, I'm going to get on a soapbox for just a second. Do you mind? Is that okay?
I'll watch you climb up. Yep.
Okay. Take a deep breath, everybody. Okay. So first of all, the thing I want to stress is you do not have to make a decision about ESOP. You have to make a decision about whether or not you want to study it.
Okay.
Right. That feasibility study is the first step. But I usually have 2, 3, 4 meetings with somebody before we even get to that. And those are just education. That's what I do. But when you get to that feasibility study, those are designed to be minimal cost. Okay. They're designed to be something where you don't even have to think about it. If you're serious about looking into this, you just go, yep. Okay. Okay. So forgive me for not wanting to just give a blind number. I'll be honest, it's a flat fee, but it's one of those things where there's a lot of different people that do this. And I just want to make sure you understand that that's the first step.
Okay.
So
fair enough.
Yep. If you decide to move forward, here's where I'm going to get on my soapbox. If you talk to somebody who wants to charge you a success fee to do an ESOP, meaning a percentage of the transaction, turn around and walk away.
And why is that?
Because in a normal M&A transaction, a success fee implies that I have to go out and find a buyer for you. Right. And I'm doing a lot of work to do that. There's hundreds of emails going out. There's LOIs coming in all over the place. And I'm going out to find a buyer. But guess what? In an ESOP transaction, You hire the person who's buying your company from you.
Okay.
So we sit down, I get to know you, I understand your personality, who you are, and I connect you with 2 or 3 different trustees. We sit down together, I give you a worksheet with interview questions so you know what to ask, and we interview these trustees together and you choose one.
Interesting.
That is not success fee worthy. So an ESOP transaction should be a flat fee. And if somebody wants to charge you a percentage of the transaction, turn and walk away.
Okay. That's great input.
Yep.
So yeah, and as we're talking, the questions keep jumping out at me. So I know they're a long way from what we initially thought we might discuss, but employees have to want to participate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a seller goes down this road and the staff are like, no, I was leaving next week anyway, and thanks anyway, and I'm not interested. What is that very common, or what? At some point that just kills the deal?
So can I tell you what Executive Matt says? Thanks when you say that.
Yes, please.
Thank God those employees are gone before I have to pay them anything.
Great. Okay.
Right? Let's weed them out of the system. If they're thinking they're gone next week anyway, they're not in the right place. Let's weed them out of the system before they start getting shares, before they start building up balances. Now, for the people that are in though, and again, in a lot of ESOP companies, this culture is already in place, right? So one of the first things that happens after the ESOP transaction is you educate the employees, right? The management needs to know. So when employees are introduced to this and they start asking management questions, they can answer them.
Okay.
Right? The last thing you want your employees to do is start Googling what is an ESOP and is it good for me, right? Because Google always gives you the right answer. Talk to my kids. They go to YouTube for everything. I don't know.
Yeah.
So as you're going through this, part of this process is working with your trustee, working with people like me to roll this out successfully to your teams.
Okay.
And then to create structures and processes ongoing to continue to build the wheel, right? I worked for an ESOP company where we made ESOPs for a living in the past, right? So my previous job, and we made ESOPs. We were an ESOP. And we still educated around what is our ESOP all the time. It was just part of our conversation.
Okay.
It wasn't, we're ESOP experts, we know everything. It's, we're going to continue to stay on top of this and making sure we're all growing together.
Okay. All right. Well, that certainly makes sense. And so there's, back to the question of staff not wanting to participate, does there need to be a certain number of participants or participation or a percentage?
So the cool part about this is they're in.
Okay.
They don't have to do anything. They just have to work there. They have to meet the criteria laid out in the ESOP plan.
Okay.
So again, they could be 18 years old, work 1,000 hours a year. You're in.
Okay.
You don't opt in or opt out. You're in, and you get the shares. And if you don't want them when you leave, well, tough. If you've been there for 10 years, and you have a $400,000 balance and you don't want it, okay. But you know what I mean? I don't know people like that, right? So they are not contributing to themselves financially. They contribute their time, talent, and expertise to the success of the company. They receive shares through the process. The share price is established every year. That value goes up, 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 especially while the debt to the sellers is being paid down. It goes up very quickly. And they see can I let you in a secret?
Please.
Do you know why we create 1 million shares?
Why is that?
Is so your employees don't see that they got 0.015 shares in a year.
Okay.
Right? If you've got 200 employees and there were 500 shares that the previous owners had, and they're getting 1/30 of that every year, no, we create 1 million shares so they see they go, oh my gosh, I got 25 shares this year.
Interesting.
So there's some psychology that goes into the actual planning of these ESOPs to bring buy-in from your team as well.
Okay. And you alluded to, which was my next question, valuation. So how is the initial value determined? And then it needs to be valued every year to determine what the appropriate share price is?
Yeah, absolutely. So the original value of the company, right, is done through a valuation that's part of the feasibility study. So in the feasibility study, you know how much the company's worth.
Okay.
But then in every transaction, there's two sides. There's the people selling it and the people buying it. The people buying it do their own valuation. Right, the trustee has a valuation firm creating a range of value. We negotiate, and the goal of an ESOP transaction is to find a fair market value of the company.
Okay.
Once that fair market value is established, every year, then the trustees team does another valuation so they can set the share price.
Okay.
Right? As the debt gets paid down, as the company grows, that share price goes up, up, up.
Okay. And I believe it goes without saying, but fair market value would be if it was sold to the fair market, whoever might be in that arena at the time. So,
yeah, well, and because this isn't a publicly traded company, the fair market value is determined by the valuations that are done based on the internal mechanics and economics of the company versus what the stock market says, right? So we have to sell it for a fair market value. But again, the irony of that is a fair market value is not usually a whole lot different than what a PE company would buy it for.
Perfect. And that's where I was going with that, is it truly is an option that should be very similar. And then it's just the structure. Okay. So what about timing? Well, how long does it take if like the one that you're closing, how long ago did you start working with them to piece this together?
We actually started doing the feasibility study right before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
4 to 6 weeks later, they said, hey, yeah, let's go. Right after the holidays, we started the transaction process, and 5 months later, we're closing.
Okay. So 6-7 months beginning to end is reasonable.
Yeah. Feasibility is 4 to 6 weeks. The transaction's 4 to 6 months.
Okay.
Typically.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. So I always call the process, the first step is I think I want to, right? Where we're doing the education, where we're learning and getting to that study. And then after the study, we jump into, if you say yes, let's go forward, then it's, I know I want to.
Okay.
But I also want to be clear about that is sometimes people take that study and go, you know what, this is really cool, but I think I'm going to go with the other options. But they've got this valuation then that tells them what they have. So when they go to market, they have information that others might not have.
Okay.
Right. So they can negotiate differently than they would have otherwise.
Yeah.
Once you go through that process, once you assemble your professional team and you go through due diligence and the negotiations and everything that happens in a transaction of any kind for a company, we get to the close of I know I want to, and we get to the we are phase, right? Where we're talking about the annual valuation and the ongoing education of your employees. Through that whole process, if you've ever been through an M&A transaction, especially like due diligence, and Matt, you're going to start nodding at this, you're used to a very combative situation, right? They come into the room having gone through your financials with baseball bats wrapped in barbed wire, and they're getting ready to take your company apart to see where they can save some money, where they don't have to pay you. An ESOP transaction is collaborative. So I was in Tampa, Florida for a due diligence meeting. And this was referred to me by a traditional M&A guy. They had turned down a bunch of PE offers and they were going ESOP.
Huh.
And he sat through the due diligence meeting. It was his first ESOP due diligence meeting. And when I sent him a calendar event for a half a day, he was like, is this enough time? I mean, he's used to 2-day due diligence meetings. And I'm like, no, we're going to go to dinner the night before at a nice restaurant, all of us. And the next day we're going to sit down. We're going to go through a presentation talking about the company. The trustees team and his financial advisors are going to ask questions to make sure they understand the company, not to tear it down, but to make sure that they can accurately project what's going on. Because the truth of it is an ESOP transaction, the trustee is buying future cash flow. It's
Makes
that
perfect
simple,
sense.
right?
Yep.
So they don't need to put on the brass knuckles to take money from you in a transaction. They just want to understand it so they can go forward and do the same thing that we already did and create a range of values so we know how much your company's worth so we can go through a negotiation. When we got done, he was like, that's it? He's like, that was amazing. He's like, so it's a big part of what I do is communicate these companies to the buyers, to the trustees team, and set them up so they can answer the questions. And nobody knows their business better than they do. So I shouldn't be answering the questions, they should. But knowing that the trustee is technically, while not on their side, somebody that they've hired that they're going to be working with for years, it's just a very different situation. And it's not nearly as heart-wrenching as watching people look at this thing that you built that's like another child to you, wanting to do nothing other than just tear it down so they don't have to pay as much.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. Based on what you're describing, I'm assuming that the success rate of these going the distance once they start is higher than a typical acquisition.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The LOI, we celebrate it, but it's almost a non-event when that gets signed because um, the truth of it is in negotiations in an ESOP transaction are a series of emails.
Hmm.
We
Y-
put together the first offer, which is different, right? The seller puts together the first offer, that gets sent to the trustee team. They talk about it, they send it back. We reconvene, make the changes that we want to make. We send it back, and it's a 2 to 3 week process typically. Just
Yeah,
we
that's
meet once or twice a week and just bounce offers back and forth until we get to the price and all the things that go into these things.
okay.
Yep, it's fun. We have a good time.
It sounds like it. Yeah. And so if somebody's interested in doing this, they own a company now, they think they might fit. Of course, they need to reach out to you 2 to 3 years before they're ready. What should they be focusing on? What's the ideal positioning of a company to be able to take advantage of an ESOP?
Yeah. So here's what I tell people is, when you're thinking about this, you don't have to wait until you're ready.
Okay.
That's one of the really cool parts about an ESOP is, again, control doesn't change, right? You're getting paid out over time. In an ESOP transaction, we talked about earnouts on the PE side, and
Mm-hmm.
technically we can do earnouts on a PE transaction or on an ESOP transaction too, but they don't happen often because of something called warrants, meaning there's a share price now, there's going to be a share price 5, 10 years from now. You can actually set this up to take a little bit interest in the seller note in the front end to get a second bite at the apple later as the company has more value in 5 years. You can get a second bite at that apple and make money as the company grows.
Interesting.
So we get a lot of people that come to us and say, yeah, this is a 5 year thing or a 3 year thing, before we even start thinking about it, because I don't want to leave for 5 to 10 years. And then they look at it and go, wait, so I can start pulling money out now, get the tax benefits of ESOP for the company and for me. And I keep running it. And then as the company grows, I get paid more later for the hard work we've done. Okay. And in some cases, honestly, the sellers earn shares inside the ESOP too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
So I feel like this is a good spot to talk taxes. Do you mind?
let's do it. Yeah. And
Okay.
we've got about 5 more minutes. So yeah, let's
Oh, I'll make this very simple for
great.
people. If you're driving right now, pull over. If you are carrying anything that's breakable, set it down. Um, because this is one of the big things about ESOP that people don't necessarily know or understand. And that is the tax benefits of ESOP to the company and the seller. Let's start with the company. If you're an S Corp in the US and you are 100% employee owned, you no longer pay state or federal taxes.
Wow.
So those K1s that used to go to the shareholders now go to the ESOP, and the ESOP don't have to pay.
Wow.
Imagine what you can do inside your company with that money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it is proportional. So if you're 30% employee owned, you get 30% of that benefit. But that's a big thing.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it's mind boggling, honestly.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. It's a qualified retirement plan. And because of that, the trust doesn't have to pay the taxes. So that is one of the reasons that ESOP companies grow faster, because they can make investments and do things that other companies can't.
Mm-hmm. Well, they can be
From a
more competitive. I mean, there's so much there, right? I mean, their overhead just went down enormously.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So just take a minute and just think about, man, how much time and energy even do you spend planning for taxes that suddenly just isn't even on your mind,
A factor.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. The other thing that changes with ESOP is from a seller's point of view, right? We talk about top line versus actual return. We talked about seller notes or seller interest on the seller notes and stuff like that. But from a seller's point of view, there are you pay long-term capital gains to typically. I mean, again, I'm not a tax advisor, consult your tax advisor, but for most people, you don't pay long-term capital gain. You pay long-term capital gains versus ordinary income like you would on a PE transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a lower tax rate. But there are actually mechanisms in an ESOP transaction where you can actually defer that tax bill. And you talked about your client who didn't need the money,
Mm-hmm.
their life was set up. They could actually defer that tax bill until they pass, and then their estate doesn't pay.
Wow.
So for, again, the right people, how about a tax-free exit?
Well, and just the client I was referring to, they're probably in the $700,000 range of tax based on their exit. It's just a game changer for what they might be able to accept in price or what they might be willing to keep in the company or all of those things. Because the money's just gone if they sell the traditional way without a thank you letter from the IRS or anything. It's just gone. So
it can have a massive impact on the sellers in the company as well as the employees. Everybody should win in an ESOP exit. My job is to create the most successful ESOPs in the country. And if all three groups don't win, if the sellers don't win, if they don't maximize their return, because hey, guess what? You should get paid. You built this, get paid. If the company doesn't win, if the company's not better off, if the sellers' lives aren't changed, I didn't do the right thing.
Very good. Well, fascinating topic. I've got two more questions for you. One just is the way I like to finish my episodes, which is it's so easy for us to forget how we got where we are. Who gave you a hand up in your process that you recall that you're grateful for that just went out of their way to help?
So this is an easy one. Mr. Ed Hendricks, way back when I was a punk 19-year-old kid. I worked for a major retailer in the US, having the time of my life with other punk kids. And we were at his house one day. We were working on his deck like punk kids do for their boss. And I made some joke about how this gets me out of trouble next time I screw up at work, right? And he made everybody stop. He made everybody sit around him. And he said, listen, Matt, and this goes for everybody here. You may be my best friend in the world, but I would not hesitate to fire you. And I've got 24 Edisms that could be a whole nother podcast episode. Things that he said that changed the way I looked at the way I do business, changed the way I interact with my company, changed the way I just handle people. It's meaningful, it's real, it's authentic, and I appreciate everything Ed did for me.
Oh, that's amazing. I really appreciate you sharing that. And part of it, which is why I asked the question, is you remembered it. I mean, here you are, however many years from then, but it
was 1996.
Yeah.
So,
it stuck with you. And I think sometimes it's easy for us to forget how what we pour back into somebody can be life altering. And so, thank you for sharing that.
So, Ed, if you're out there, bless you.
Yes. And then the last question. So how do people find you? They like this conversation. They want more. They want to know if it's good for them. How do they find you?
Go to ESOPready.com, ESOPready.com. When you're there, you can learn about ESOP. You can take an assessment to see if your company on a surface level is a fit. And even more importantly, if you want to talk to me, schedule some free time on my calendar. You can get direct access to it, find a time that works for you. Please, if you're thinking about this, if you're thinking about any kind of transition, let's talk about price control, identity, and legacy, and how ESOP fits into it and whether or not it meets your goals.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, Matt, thank you so much for joining us today and for diving into the weeds on this topic that's so, in my opinion, confused by so many and misunderstood. I really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Great conversation. Great questions. Thank you so much, Matt.
You're welcome. Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode. You know, part of what I love about this podcast is it gives me an opportunity to drill into some of these topics that are so significant for us, and we just don't know what we don't know. And this is one of those topics. So we will see you on the next episode. And that's a wrap on today's episode. We hope you enjoyed the conversation and got some valuable insights into the world of buying and selling businesses. Want to be a guest on our show? If you have a deal that you'd like to discuss with us or a business story to share, we'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email using the contact information below in the episode notes, and let's make this happen. Never miss an episode. Make sure you subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And if you found today's episode helpful, please leave us a review. It helps more people like you find the show.